Thank you all for coming. Regina Gilligan, and the curator of One Bay, Shrinking Shorelines, Toxic Waters. And the title, it tells you my motivation. Oil spills, land grabs, and landfills, and my belief that art speaks louder than words. Art can build a culture of caring for places, artists knowing the place and telling stories about it. And sharing those stories means having a connection. In this year of pandemic and pause, with so much calling remotely and loudly for our attention, demands for racial and environmental justice top the list. In our shuttered time, many are um, listening and looking to how we can go forward in a sustainable way to benefit all living systems. Um, and how can profit hungry developers and cash strapped local governments who have little understanding and concern for the bay's ecology and rising tides? This really has to stop. We are in an interrelated ecosystem, and regional collaboration and decision making is critical for our future. Um, and so now I'd like to go on to our inspiring art that calls us to action. And if uh, Ian is here, I'll say hello to him. Um, and I would say that Ian is going to present a small clip of a longer piece called Tides. That is a multimedia and sound collaboration with a composer. And I maybe we could go on to I'm sorry, I do not have the written piece for Ian because I was expecting him to be on here now. So maybe we could have a look at the, this is as he calls it, a teaser for the tides. This is like a speeded up a little tidbit of a section of the bay. He has gone over, circumnavigated the bay and taken using, USGS maps of the tidal rises and falls of the bay. So each site has measurements and a montage of images of what's located at 0 meters above sea level to 3 meters, and with the predicting of rising tides.
And he's here.
Oh, great, great. And then I don't have to fumble over what I don't know really as well as you do because it's your work.
Sorry, I couldn't find the Zoom invite, but I found
it's been challenging for many.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Ian
Could I say a few words?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Well, so Tides is a project that was originally funded by the Creative Work Fund and was a collaboration with two composers, Brian Baumbush and Wayne Vitale, and originally premiered in March of last year at Minnesota Street Project in San Francisco. So we had our opening night reception, and then it sheltered in place for a while until coming down and coming back online here. And I'll be going up again, hopefully at the Milk Bar down the street from Bridge Arts sometime later this summer. And the piece, the 24-minute and 50-second video that's available, that piece was created by walking the perimeter of San Francisco Bay, trying to stay between 0 and 3 meters above current sea level, which is basically the area that over the coming 30 to 60 years, maybe 100 years, depending on whose math you believe, and how lucky we are, and whether the Antarctic ice sheet stays intact, and things like that, that'll be inundated or rendered largely unusable. So sort of inspired by the idea of a pilgrimage walk, of going, these are really beautiful and profound and very human spaces and very natural spaces that are going to go. And in a certain sense, there's also me trying to understand on some sort of kinesthetic and physical level, what does it mean to address something that's this size? Problems of the scale and issues of the scale that we're facing that are so far beyond any one person's sort of ability to get their head around. So it's a profound experience walking that much along the bay and pondering that it's all going to go. And so encourage you to take a look. There's also a whole series of prints that are up, and there's a live piece that is not online because, well, it's live. And the project site is tides.video. I think there's my little roughly 2 minutes.
Would you like me to unshare this and run the clip?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, hang on to your hats, everybody. Paradigm shift here, okay? Okay.
And I believe this is the trailer for the live show that no one has seen yet.
Right.
Thank you.
That was lovely.
Yeah, it is really, and I encourage everyone to connect with the full length piece at the end.
Oops.
Right. So now I'd like to thank you, Ian, and introduce Sarah Newton. Sarah Newton, who is a San Francisco artist. And she has some really beautiful drawings of this same area, well, along the bay.
Okay.
She
for inviting me, and here we go. I was going to say I'm not seeing any slides yet, but
yeah.
I'm going to suggest that we don't do other video clips till the end.
Okay, because it's too. All right. Okay. So, but it still looks like me and Ian. We're Where's Sarah?
Hi. Thanks for inviting me to be a part of this. These are drawings. They're ink on paper, ink wash with white gouache and a little bit of white chalk. And these are all landscapes that I discovered. I've also been making a journey around the periphery of the San Francisco Bay, mostly on foot and partially by public transportation.
Except that's not Sarah.
I'm sorry?
Oh. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's all right. These things with many participants become a little confusing sometimes.
Okay.
The host could spotlight Sarah so we could see her.
Yeah, that's what. There we go.
Is this
Okay.
yeah. All right. I started this walk down near Brisbane at the southern edge of San Francisco, and it started pretty much by chance. I was just down there exploring, and I came across a short segment of the San Francisco Bay Trail that started right around the landfill and ended abruptly right next to the freeway at the Brisbane Lagoon. And I hadn't heard about the Bay Trail before, and I was very curious about the disconnectedness of this little piece of trail in the middle of a very industrial landscape. And so I started learning more about it and decided I wanted to try and walk the sections of the Bay Trail that would eventually connect the whole circuit, because right now it just exists in pieces. And in doing that, I managed to explore a lot of environments that I wouldn't have normally gone to. This is a section of the Bay Trail in Redwood City. The last slide was underneath the 101 freeway. And well, obviously the Bay Trail doesn't connect right there. But as I made my way south down the peninsula, I started learning more about the bay and shoreline management and interacting with a whole variety of different ways of the way people manage the shoreline. Here, this is at Hunters Point, where you can see like a fully hardened shoreline. And then as I made my way further south into where the salt ponds are being reclaimed, finding little pieces of the history of the bay, its previous industrial use, its possible future use. And like Ian, I was struck by the fact that the Bay Trail has been under development for about 30 years now, and yet it's still not complete. And as I started thinking forward, say another 30 years, it struck me that it may never exist in its intended form, because even as they start to connect the disconnected sections, it's uncertain whether the sections that are already completed will be able to remain in the state that they're currently in. That's something I started investigating more. Also, and it's not here on the slide, but I also started including rough estimates of elevation in all of the titles of the pieces, just to remind people how very close we are to the water at, say, the airport or alongside the 101 freeway, which I think is in the next slide, and how tenuous all the things that we rely on really are in the face of the future of the bay. That's my say about these.
Thank you. So now Leslie Morgan, I'd like to introduce her, and these wonderful paintings that actually Leslie had sent in something different. And when I saw these on her website and the history behind them, and that is very much current now. So hi, Leslie.
Hi. Yeah, this series is the Yerba Buena Sunken Ship series. And I was familiar with this phenomena only because of my involvement with the Maritime museum, but a lot of people who've lived in San Francisco have never heard about this. And almost every time they dig to build one of the huge high rises, they come across some of the old ships that were abandoned during the gold rush. And it's kind of a crazy story where all these people from all over the world came to California to look for gold, and they just dumped their ships in Yerba Buena Cove. And the city actually offered them the ability to own the land that their ship was on if they would fill in around it. So they would fill in garbage and all sorts of stuff to make their sunken ship that was sitting on the bottom of the bay actually a landlocked kind of vessel. And there were hotels built out of these ships and brothels and bars, and they just cut a hole in the hull and open up the back and have all sorts of businesses out of them. And the Maritime Museum has a great map of where you can find them in downtown, on Montgomery and Market, and that whole area down there, Recon Valley. And the Inn Judah actually goes right through one of the wooden hulls. They had to drill through it in order to make the Inn Judah line. And I just thought this was like a crazy part of our history that most people don't realize. I'm a scuba diver, and I love diving on wrecks. I think they're fascinating. They're scary. They're full of sea life. They're dark and gloomy and kind of a weird part of history that you can see underwater in a world that makes it very different. So that's what kind of inspired me to do this series. I'm a bay swimmer, and so I feel connected to the water and aquatic park in particular, and just wanted to share a part of the history of it.
Okay. I'm a bay swimmer too.
Awesome. Are you in the water right now? It's cold.
No, I kind of wimped out at the and at Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
I'll go back.
Yeah.
So, oh, thank you. I love these, so beautiful. So now let me introduce Janie Frischke. And she has
Mute myself.
her work is a meditation between where land meets the sea. So thank you.
I'll start off by saying how I started the series I've been working on for the last 5 to 6 years. Is I was living in Hawaii for 6 months, and I hadn't really painted for about 5 or 6 years. But being in Hawaii during that time really opened up a fascinating interest with the ocean and sea life. And I had spent time in Hawaii several decades before, and also spent time snorkeling at Hanauma Bay. And while I was there for those 6 months, it was my favorite place to go. And when I saw how different Hanauma Bay was to what it was like when I was there before, I was really quite startled. So I've been working on various series about the ocean and the bay, and it's not like this image is not a reference to any particular place. It's more the essence of my feeling about the water, about the waves, about the beaches, and about tide pools. I found tide pools to be fascinating. So the tide pools appear even when, like in a situation like this, when you're looking down from high, you can see it. Uh-oh, somebody isn't muted. So I did many paintings that were of this kind of essence, where you get a feeling for the tide, you get a feeling for the tide pools. But one of the things that I came to truly respect from spending time in the ocean and spending time around surfers is their true love and dedication to conservation of the ocean. And one of the things that I try to do in both my paintings and also my Instagram postings is to encourage people to get out there on the bay, get out there in the ocean, because when people spend time there, they really appreciate what we have to offer so much more. And then they become very active in ocean conservation and bay conservation. So that's part of what my goal is with these paintings is I want them to be beautiful and I want people to appreciate them. And I wanted them to encourage people to get out there in nature. I mean, here it is Earth Day, and how many of us are just hovered over our computers 8 to 10 hours a day? Way too many of us, I'm sure. Um, but this is just a way for us to start getting more in contact with the earth. Um, there was an article recently in Washington Post about the power of being in water and being in the ocean and how it soothes the soul. And that brings us to this latest series I did starting last summer. I hadn't painted any portraits or figurative work in like 15 years. But then I was so upset by the murder of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor that I did portraits of them. And from doing that, I just felt such a touch with humanity that I haven't touched on for a while in my paintings. So I started a series last summer based on the people in China camp. It was my favorite refuge for the last 9 or 10 months. It was one of the few places that I could go to be out in the water, by the water, in nature, and experience the joy that that brings to so many people. And just seeing these kids out there having such a good time, and it just opened up my heart. I just got so much love and joy from it. It was really my refuge, and it still is. So I ended up doing about 18 paintings in this particular series. And I just had a showing at Marin Museum of Contemporary Art, which just came down Sunday. And it featured the 18 paintings of the bay there at China Camp Park, and also some of the paintings you saw that was in the previous series. So, it's just, I'm just doing my best to encourage people to get out there, either get on the beach or get in the water, experience what we have to offer, because that's when people can really give with their heart and they can understand what they can do to help our environmental crisis. And maybe they will take steps to do more because they will they truly experience the pleasure and the gift that being in the water and being outside has to offer. So if you have any questions, just let me know.
That's really lovely. I think Regina's having a problem here. Regina.
Okay. I don't know why it muted. Um, yeah, I was just saying, I was looking aside because we had a couple of uh, folks not getting on the Zoom, and I think Susie is here. Yay!
Yeah, sorry,
And
I had trouble finding the link, and thank you.
you're not alone. You weren't alone. So yeah, uh, I've known Susie's work over a long period of time, and it's so beautiful and draws you into the sky, the water, the atmosphere. So you can take it from there, Susie. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, Regina. Listening to those of you who've just spoken, it's something very wonderful to hear about all these artists who focus so much on the water and the environment around us. Deeply focused on it. For myself, my seascape thing started when I got a studio at Pier 70 in San Francisco. Some of you know it very well. Sarah Newton, for example, used to have a studio there. It's a funky building, and my studios, I've had various studio spaces, but they overlook the water. And when I moved in there as a workspace, I felt like, man, I've just got to do something about that view out there. It was so obvious, and it began this long exploration of what I saw as this big floating still life out there. And the more I looked, the more I saw, and it's gave me this sort of stage almost, protagonists being, you know, ships, big ships coming and going or waiting at anchor, and the light and the weather just constantly shifting and changing and giving me new material all day long. And so what started off as a little afternoon of dabbling, looking out the window, just painting what I saw, it's become an exploration that's become more and more abstract. You know, it's as much about painting and color in its, you know, in that sense, as it is about representing something. You know, I've gone back and forth between a more realistic approach, although never, frankly, never that realistic. And I think when I'm lost in my process, I hope to just be kind of, it's like diving into the ether, and you know, my palette is you know, where I'm stirring up all these colors and emotions and trying to make something happen. It's like a journey in its own right, trying to, you know, to begin a painting and take it through to something that feels like it's resolved. So nowadays I don't really have a you know, when I begin, I don't know where it's going to take me, and it's actually quite hard. But you know, that in a way it sort of fits the seascape aspect of things, because you know, there's vessels out there or go on journeys, and there's some poetry as you wonder what their story is, what people are doing, where they're going, what's on them. And some of it's very depressing and dark, because there's, you know, there's things, great big symbols of all the things that we're concerned about, you know, pollution and the you know, fossil fuels and carbon footprint and globalization. They're all right there, sort of floating on the water in quite a poetic way, and they look very beautiful to me at times. So it's a, you know, it's an interesting, you know, nothing's black and white, so to speak. There's good and bad to all the things around us. And I don't know if you've noticed lately, there's so many container ships out there. And you know, my studio windows, I'm sort of on a corner upstairs, and it's just packed. My view is just packed with container ships. I understand there's a sort of backlog going on because of the pandemic. It's It really changes. It's not like a lonely tanker in the distance anymore. It's chock-a-block with these massive vessels. So anyway, this painting you see in front of you was one I did at the beginning of the pandemic, and I was just trying to calm myself down and delve into, you know, that the most peaceful, beautiful colors I could conjure up. So that's the story of that one. Again, it's you know, color and how I apply the paint is where the juice happens for me. And you know, it's a lot of. I'd like to get looser, and you know, you know, the more you do it and the more you let go, the more you learn about painting. So I think the seascape thing has served a very useful and interesting sort of backbone for my work over the last quite a few years. I can't do the math. 2003, that's like 18 years. Like,
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much. Is there anything else I need to say? Okay.
Thank you. I mean, they are so full of stories of the region, of the water and sky.